Hello, General Hospital will reveal Blaze's return to Port Charles was far more than a shocking homecoming, it was the spark that ignited a reckoning. For Christina, it was an emotional earthquake. One that threatened to shake the fragile stability she had fought so hard to rebuild. But for the rest of Port Charles, Blaze's presence signaled a seismic shift. An unearthing of long-buried secrets and a confrontation with a hidden menace whose influence had seeped into every corner of their lives. Behind the glamour and familiar face was a woman carrying a devastating truth. Sidwell, a man cloaked in power and manipulation, was the architect behind a series of events that had quietly destroyed lives, including those closest to Blaze. She had stayed away for a reason. For too long, Blaze had kept silent to protect her family, burying the weight of betrayal and fear beneath her success. But as the darkness surrounding Lucas and Sunny began to grow, as their names became quietly entangled in Sidwell's schemes, Blaze realized her silence could no longer serve as a shield. She had reached her breaking point, and with that came a choice, to keep running or to return and fight back. What followed was a clandestine meeting held in the shadows, where Blaze turned to the only two people she believed could truly help, Jason and Anna. This was not just a cry for help, it was a declaration of war. Blaze came forward with a story so personal, so harrowing, it changed the way they saw everything. She revealed the truth about her family's suffering, a quiet torment inflicted by Sidwell over the course of many years. Natalia, her mother, had once been a woman of strength and resilience. But under Sidwell's relentless control, she became a shell of herself, forced to comply with his every command. She endured it all, the humiliation, the guilt, the silence, for the sake of her children. Every decision she made was to protect Blaze and Marco. And Marco, the long-lost brother Blaze had only ever hinted at, had not vanished by accident. He had been pulled into Sidwell's orbit, manipulated into carrying out his father's bidding. Sidwell had used him as a pawn, a puppet bound by threats and emotional blackmail, ensuring that neither Marco nor Natalia could ever escape. Blaze had carried this burden in secret for years, trying to distance herself from the toxicity of it all. But she had never stopped watching, never stopped fearing. And when Sidwell's reach began to threaten Lucas and Sunny, two men Blaze deeply respected, she knew she could no longer be a bystander. Their lives were now caught in the web that had once ensnared her family. And Blaze refused to let the cycle continue. In that meeting with Jason and Anna, Blaze laid it all bare, the years of emotional imprisonment, the manipulation, the hidden agendas, and the silent suffering of her mother and brother. Her voice trembled not from fear, but from fury and resolve. She was done hiding, done pretending. She wanted Sidwell exposed. She wanted justice. Jason and Anna listened, absorbing every detail, understanding the magnitude of what Blaze had endured and what she was now asking of them. This wasn't just about taking down a criminal, it was about freeing people who had been silently enslaved by fear, guilt, and manipulation. Blaze had transformed from a woman haunted by her past into a fearless advocate for her family, and that strength moved them. They agreed to help her. They would bring Sidwell down. And with that, the tide began to turn. Blaze's return had not only rekindled long-buried emotions for Christina, it had launched a covert mission to dismantle a dangerous empire. The battle ahead would be fierce. But Blaze had already won the most important fight, reclaiming her voice, and using it to save those who could no longer save themselves. With unwavering determination burning in her chest, Blaze made the most difficult yet necessary decision of her life, to ask for help. She sought out Jason and Anna. Two people known not only for their strength and tactical brilliance but for their ability to stand firm in the face of darkness. She knew this wasn't a battle she could fight alone. Her mother and brother were still trapped under the suffocating control of Sidwell, a man whose reach extended far beyond what most could see. It was no longer about her pain or her past, this was about saving the people she loved from a force that had dictated the course of their lives for far too long. Blaze's plea was raw and unfiltered. She laid bare the emotional abuse, the manipulation, the fear that had silenced her family for years. She spoke not as a victim, but as a daughter and sister desperate to free the people who had suffered silently in the shadows. Every word was charged with anguish, but also with a fierce resilience. She told Jason and Anna everything, how Sidwell had used Natalia as leverage, forcing her into compliance, and how Marco had been coerced into acting as an extension of Sidwell's will. Unable to escape the grasp of a father who had turned family into prisoners. Jason, ever the calm strategist, listened carefully, analyzing every detail Blaze provided. Already anticipating how to dismantle the operation piece by piece. Anna, deeply moved by the personal nature of the story, recognized not just the danger Sidwell posed, but the emotional torment Blaze had carried alone. There was no hesitation between them. They didn't just agree to help, they committed themselves to the mission. Understanding that taking Sidwell down would not only save Blaze's family but also prevent further destruction from a man who thrived on control and chaos. Together, the three devised a meticulous plan. Anna used her WSB expertise and network to begin tracing Sidwell's financial web, identifying key associates and uncovering the infrastructure that kept his influence so well hidden. Jason, on the other hand, worked behind the scenes, planting surveillance, extracting intelligence, and preparing for what would be a highly coordinated takedown. Blaze, though not a trained operative, played a pivotal role. She knew Sidwell's habits, his patterns, his weaknesses. Her insights were invaluable, turning the tide of the investigation with a clarity only someone who had lived in Sidwell's shadow could offer. Days turned into weeks as the trio worked in secrecy, gathering enough evidence to ensure that when the time came, Sidwell would not be able to slither out of accountability. Every move was calculated, every risk weighed. And finally, when the moment was right, they struck. The raid was swift and surgical. Sidwell, who had always believed himself untouchable, was caught off guard. The walls of lies he had built around himself crumbled in an instant. Hidden records, digital communications, blackmail files, all of it came to light. For years, he had used his power to exploit, manipulate, and destroy behind a veneer of legitimacy, but the truth now stood exposed. Law enforcement, tipped off and guided by Jason and Anna, arrived with warrants and seized everything. The empire that Sidwell had spent decades constructing collapsed overnight. But perhaps the most profound moment came when Natalia and Marco were finally freed. Natalia, though emotionally worn, stood tall beside Blaze, no longer under anyone's control. Marco, his guilt etched into his face, looked at his sister with a mix of remorse and gratitude. For the first time in years, they were no longer captives. Blaze had given them back their freedom. The entire town of Port Charles soon came to learn the magnitude of what had transpired, and just how close they had come to falling under the shadow of a man who operated without conscience. Thanks to Blaze, the truth was no longer hidden. Her courage, her refusal to remain silent, and her alliance with Jason and Anna had not only destroyed Sidwell's empire but restored justice to those who had been silenced for far too long. The fall of Sidwell was not merely the end of a corrupt and manipulative empire, it was a moment of long overdue liberation for those who had been caught in his intricate web of lies, intimidation, and control. For Natalia and Marco, the collapse of Sidwell's influence was like breathing after years of suffocation. Natalia, finally free from the oppressive grip of the man she once trusted, reclaimed her voice and her dignity. Marco, no longer a pawn in his father's cruel games, could begin the process of healing from the psychological scars Sidwell had inflicted. But the victory extended far beyond the boundaries of one family. Unbeknownst to many, Sidwell's reach had begun to seep into the political and personal lives of other Port Charles residents, namely Lucas and Sonny. Through veiled threats, coercion, and careful manipulation of power dynamics, Sidwell had begun orchestrating a silent campaign to destabilize their lives. Lucas had been unknowingly positioned in the crosshairs of a larger scheme meant to discredit and dismantle his reputation, while Sonny, already balancing the challenges of his personal and business affairs, found himself teetering on the edge of a political trap laced with danger and deceit. Had Blaze not returned? Had she not exposed the truth, it is likely that both men would have become collateral damage in a game they never chose to play. Blaze, once known for her powerful voice and commanding stage presence, underwent a profound transformation in the eyes of the community. She emerged from the shadows not as a fallen star seeking redemption, but as a quiet warrior, a woman who chose the path of resistance over silence, justice over blood loyalty. Her decision to stand against her own father, a man whose power had once seemed insurmountable, was not just an act of rebellion. It was a profound declaration of her integrity, her courage, and her unwavering devotion to those she loved. The journey had not been easy. Blaze had been forced to confront the harshest of truths, that the man who had given her life had also taken away so much from it. But she never wavered. She stood firm in the belief that the people she cared about, her mother, her brother, Christina, Lucas, Sonny, deserved better. They deserved freedom, peace, and protection from the darkness that had plagued them for too long. In choosing to expose Sidwell, Blaze sacrificed her own comfort, her public image, and a piece of her emotional security, all to ensure that no one else would suffer as her family had. And for that, the people of Port Charles saw her with new eyes. She was no longer simply Blaze, the captivating artist with a magnetic voice. She was a symbol of resilience, of bravery born from pain, and of strength forged in adversity. Whispers of her heroism spread quietly through the town, not through flashy headlines or grand declarations, but through the sincere gratitude of those she had unknowingly protected. Mothers whispered her name with reverence. Friends exchanged knowing glances when her song played over the radio. And for Christina, the woman who had once loved her and perhaps never stopped, Blaze's return meant more than closure, it meant hope. Blaze's story became a quiet legend in Port Charles. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful acts of heroism come not from those who seek glory, but from those who choose to do what is right, even when it costs them everything. Christina, who had once loved Blaze with the intensity of a flame that seemed impossible to extinguish, found herself overwhelmed with emotion as she witnessed the extraordinary transformation in the woman she had once known so intimately. The Blaze who had returned to Port Charles was not the same fiery singer who had once filled rooms with her voice and Christina's heart with both joy and heartache. This was a woman who had been tested, who had walked through the fire of personal loss, betrayal, and danger, and emerged from the ashes stronger, steadier, and undeniably changed. It was impossible for Christina to ignore the quiet strength that now radiated from Blaze, not in a dramatic or boastful way, but in the resolute calm of someone who had faced the darkest parts of herself and the world around her. There was a weight to her presence now, a gravity that made every glance and every word feel more grounded, more meaningful. And beneath that newfound strength, Christina could still see the woman she had once fallen in love with, the passion in her eyes, the empathy in her voice, and the tenderness in her silences. Seeing Blaze step into a role that demanded sacrifice, vulnerability, and bravery stirred something deep inside Christina. She couldn't help but reflect on the woman Blaze used to be, the one who had struggled to find her place, who sometimes ran from intimacy out of fear, who left when the pain became too much to carry. That woman had been broken in many ways, shaped by the invisible hands of manipulation and familial pressure. But the woman who stood before Christina now had reclaimed her agency. She had made the impossible choice to turn against her own father, to seek justice over loyalty, to expose buried truths in order to protect others, including Christina's own family. As the dust of past heartbreak began to settle, Christina felt something unfamiliar: peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes from forgetting what once was, but the kind that emerges when pain is acknowledged, accepted, and healed. She and Blaze had once shared a love that burned hot and bright, but that fire had consumed them. leaving behind scorched remnants of what could have been. Now, that same fire was returning, not as a destructive blaze, but as a quiet, steady warmth fueled by growth, understanding, and courage. There was no need for grand gestures or impassioned declarations between them. Instead, there was a silence that said everything, the kind of silence that speaks of wounds healing, of hearts slowly beating in sync once again. Christina began to feel a pull toward Blaze, not out of nostalgia, but out of recognition. This was someone who had faced her demons and had come back not just alive, but better, someone who understood what it meant to break, to rebuild, and to rise again. The spark that once flickered between them had never truly died. It had merely been buried under the rubble of grief, disappointment, and time. But now, as they stood once more in each other's orbit, that spark glowed again, soft but insistent, whispering of a second chance. No longer flickering embers lost in the ashes of their past, the flame between Christina and Blaze began to kindle anew. Gently fed by mutual respect, shared pain, and the daring hope that maybe, just maybe, love still had a place in their future. Amid the chaos that had threatened to engulf Port Charles, the betrayals, the buried secrets, the power struggles playing out behind closed doors, there came a moment of clarity. A stillness after the storm. It was not easily won. The community had been shaken to its core by the revelation of Sidwell's manipulations, the collapse of his empire, and the emotional toll his control had taken on so many lives. Yet in that very moment, when the dust had begun to settle and justice had prevailed, something remarkable happened, a quiet, profound reunion unfolded, one born not of despair, but of hope. Blaze and Christina found their way back to one another, not through desperate apologies or lingering regrets, but through the unspoken understanding of two souls who had walked through fire and come out stronger. This time, their paths didn't cross amid heartbreak or parting. There were no rushed goodbyes or lingering glances filled with pain. Instead, there was a quiet embrace, not only physical, but emotional, that signaled something deeper than reconciliation. It signified rebirth. They had both changed, grown into versions of themselves that could finally meet without fear, without resentment. Blaze had stepped into the role of a protector. A quiet heroine who had faced her past and reclaimed her power, not for glory, but for the sake of love and justice. Christina had rebuilt her life brick by brick after a long season of emotional turmoil, rediscovering her sense of self and learning what it meant to forgive, not just others, but herself. Together, they stood at a crossroads that didn't feel uncertain or intimidating, but full of promise. The love that had once been eclipsed by grief now found space to breathe. In the safety of each other's arms, they rediscovered not only their affection but their purpose. No longer bound by the shadows of their past, they looked toward the future with eyes wide open, not to what had been lost, but to what could be created anew. And Port Charles, long plagued by the tremors of hidden conflict and silent suffering, also began to heal. Blaze's courage had set off a ripple effect, not just in the dismantling of Sidwell's control, but in inspiring others to speak truth, to fight for what was right, to believe in second chances. Natalia and Marco were free. Lucas and Sonny were safe. And the town, once teetering on the edge of deeper turmoil, began to reclaim its equilibrium. In the end, it wasn't just the victory over a corrupt figure that mattered. It was the triumph of love, sacrifice, and truth, forces that no scheme, no lie, and no legacy of control could ever truly bury. Blaze and Christina's reunion wasn't simply the rekindling of a past romance. It was the embodiment of something more enduring, that no matter how dark the path may seem, the light of love and justice will always find a way to shine through. Together, hand in hand, they walked forward, not as broken individuals trying to patch together what was lost, but as whole people, ready to build something stronger. And for Port Charles, this was more than a happy ending. It was a new beginning. Stay tuned for the upcoming episodes of General Hospital as the story of Blaze and Christina continues to unfold in new, powerful ways. Their emotional reunion has sparked a flame that promises to burn brighter than ever before, but love in Port Charles is never without complications. As they attempt to rebuild their relationship on a foundation of honesty and mutual growth, both women must navigate the lingering shadows of their past and the impact of the choices that brought them here. Theirs is not just a story of romantic reconciliation, but of personal redemption, emotional bravery, and the unwavering desire to protect those they love most. Viewers can expect deeper insight into the emotional scars that shaped Blaze and Christina's paths, as well as the renewed strength that now defines them. With Sidwell's dark empire finally dismantled, new challenges will inevitably rise, some from within their own hearts, others from forces outside of their control. Blaze, now seen as a heroine by the people of Port Charles, will grapple with what it means to live in the aftermath of her revelations. Christina, torn between her past pain and present love, will be forced to ask herself if she can fully open her heart again. Can two people, forever changed by loss and survival, learn how to love without fear? Don't miss a moment as this compelling love story continues to develop. The chemistry between Blaze and Christina is undeniable, but their journey is far from over, with secrets still to uncover, relationships to mend, and the ever-present tension of Port Charles looming in the background. The road ahead will be anything but smooth. But through every high and low, one thing remains certain: their connection is stronger than ever, and it just might be the key to a future neither of them dared dream of. Tune in to General Hospital to witness each chapter of their powerful, heart-tugging story as it unfolds.